The assumption of African Americans who saw this amendment was that this was the amendment that gave them equality, a road to citizenship, a road to equal suffrage, a road basically to a country where there would be no distinctions by color. Now, that said, because of the wording of the amendment, it did have limits. It was declarative only, didn't really give any rights because it doesn't give any explicit rights. So it leaves as an open question what rights are attached to freedom. Also, one other example of a limitation is it possesses a clause that says there is an exception to this business of slavery not existing anymore. And the exception is, but for crimes whereby those who have been accused have been convicted. So that if you've been accused of a crime and convicted, you could have your freedom abridged or taken away. You could be treated as an involuntary servant. And that's what ends up happening in the late 1800s and early 1900s, well into the 20th century. Criminals are sometimes imprisoned. Their labor is treated as slave labor. They are leased out, sometimes in large groups, to private contractors or farms. They are even sometimes put in chains. And for the most part, these prisoners I'm talking about are African American. The most common crime would be non-payment of debts. And of course, many of these former slaves are in debt. And if they can't pay the debt, then they become criminals, then they find themselves in chains in these places, and it looks an awful lot like slavery. And so you can understand the confusion and ultimately the great resentment that the very measure which a generation of African Americans assumed was their ticket to absolute equality and the end of these sorts of things could also be used to preserve a kind of slavery in this country.